So this is what we're going to do. We're making this conceal button stand. You see there's no stitching here at all. Button stand is here underneath where the buttons are going. And just to follow up, my friend is here today and he's wearing the exact shirt that he needs to because it has also concealed button stand, but you see he's got this stitch over here, the stitch line, touching your body, and this is not stitched down, so this tends to flap open. So it's a lost peel. It is my favorite thing to say. I can say it. No one will stop me. So if that's what you want, you can do that, of course. But this one is not going to have a stitch here. So here, no stitching. And then the button stand is just fixed in a few places so that this doesn't flap about. This is going to like remain secure like that. And how do we do that? Let's see. So let's look at the pieces we're going to need. If we're doing a complete concealed button stand without any top stitch over here, we're going to have a double layer of this front piece. Now, you can discuss with your client what's going to work for them. If, depending on the shape, we can do this whole front piece as 2 layers because you're going to have 2 layers if you don't want to have a stitch line here. Now, this particular client has a particular shape, and what I've noticed is that with such a shape, there's often this like bubble here at the armhole. So, what I often do with gents of this particular shape is that we split this front panel into 2, because that means over here I can shape that particular shape, and over here I can also bring the armhole just closer into the arm so it doesn't really flap about like that. This was really just an eyesore for us. And because of that, I'm only doubling this piece. This client I just absolutely adore because he loves color like I love color. I have a lot of clients that just do white and blue shirts, and I love them as well. But I really love this client because he is just a man of color. So, yes, we're going to have obviously our front and our left and right, and then in addition to that, another layer underneath, left and right. And we need a strip for the button stand. So this, I've got it at 8 centimeters wide in total, and I put a fusing just on the one side. I'm not such a fan of fusing because it's going to be on the inside. It's okay. So it's 8 centimeters wide, and I turn up 1 centimeter, and then I just fold that in so that we'll stitch it on one side, and all of this seam will be completely concealed. I'll stitch it like that, and then stitch it like so. So all of that will be concealed. You won't see any of that stitching underneath. So, joining this portion of the side, I'm going to do after I have the front ready. So what I'm going to do at the front is first just join, that kind of underlayer to the top layer, just like that. So I'm going to stitch this a centimeter seam allowance. That's just what I have. You can do whatever seam allowance you can. Now, maybe I must just say here, in the before times, with that particular shape, I used to shape out this section because to me it made logical sense that, obviously this portion here is a lot extra or a little bit extra, depending on the person. So I'd shape this up. But chatting to this other guy I work with now, phenomenal man when it comes to tailoring, has so much knowledge. He actually suggested we keep the front as a dead straight piece. And that shape that we wanted here, we now do here in this side piece, which actually has turned out to be a much better solution to that situation where you have the extraness in this region. So in any event, I'm going to stitch that, and I'm going to give it an understitch. So I'm going to stitch that a centimeter seam allowance, and then I'll stitch on this maroon, just to understitch to keep it in that direction. And here, especially for this client, I just have so much fun with this because I'll do a contrasting stitch here just to bring even more color, more pop, more fash. So I'm going to go and do there. I'm done sewing the front pieces together. And what I also did here, you can see I just put a little strip of fusing on the underside, just to give it that nice, neat edge. And then here, I've just given it an understitch, ironed that nicely so that from the front side, you don't see the underside poking through like a mad person. So here I always just have to think very carefully. This is going to be on top. So this is where the buttonholes are going to be. Then here's my strip, which is going to go like that, like so. My strip's going to be there, and there's going to be my buttonhole. Is that correct? Yes. So with the strip, I am just going to kind of line it up here to the very top and see where is my very edge. There it is. And where's the edge of the bottom? It's there. Just kind of marking that. Now here, I'm going to mark down my buttonholes. And I just do this with my usual 7 centimeters from the raw edge. And then from there, just remember all the timetables we learned in school. What do we have? 9, 18, 27, 36, 45. And I think I'll stop there. Or shall I do one more? Yeah, let's do one more. So, yeah, you see, here's my end. So I can't really go too close over here. Even that one, actually. I've done so many shirts for this client, I should really just write this down. No, I don't think we're going to do that one, because I want to really finish off here. That is quite a bit too far. Yeah, I finish it off kind of like this. Yeah, let's do that buttonhole. Why not? So here, I'm not going to do the buttonholes 1.5 centimeters from the edge, because this is going to line up more or less like this. So I'm already 0.5 centimeter from the edge. So on this one, I'm going to do 1 centimeter from the edge. That's going to be the top of my buttonhole. And then, let me just mark all this out. Nothing too exciting to see here. Just all the buttons and where they're going to hang out. Is that really, because that buttonhole is going to end here. And that's like the end of the garment. Now, I think I'm actually going to cancel that buttonhole, because that buttonhole is going to be 1.5 centimeters down, and that just brings me too close to the end here, because there's still a seam coming here. No, that's going to just be too close. So getting that buttonhole, these are my buttonholes. On this side, I like to do all of this one time. So I'm going to measure 7.5, because I don't want it to be too close to the top of the buttonhole, or directly at the top of the buttonhole. And then from there, 9, 18, 27, 36, and 45, I think was our last one. And I can always line it up and just make sure I haven't done, it happens. You're busy working, busy chatting, busy thinking about fashion. You can make a little error there with the maths. But if you just check yourself like that, you'll spot it very quickly. All right, so I'm going to go and do my buttonholes here. And then obviously that, we stitch onto that. So there we have the buttonholes done. Here are our buttons on. Obviously just checking everything is lining up nicely. And then here, I don't want this to go all the way into the hem, because that's going to create quite a bit of bulk to turn up. So I just kind of measure more or less a button's distance, cut that off. I've done a whole bunch of different styles here. It kind of depends what I feel like on the day. And I've just ironed this into a little triangle. And then here I'm going to see what I can remove to remove that bulk. Obviously I could just stitch it like that, but that's going to be a lot of bulk. So I'm just going to remove that. Obviously I can remove a bit of that and a bit of that. I can remove a little bit. See a little triangle there that's now glued down onto the fusing. Remove a little bit of that. And obviously a little bit of that. Yeah, and that's going to give me a smooth enough triangle. So here, I marked. Now, where was the top? There it is. I'm going to line this up with my stitch line. Where are my pins? In here. Okay, so just line this up with the stitch line of that understitch, and I'm just going to pin that in place. And before I stitch this down, I'm just going to double check. Sometimes I'll first do this and then measure out my buttons, just because I don't want to end up with a half centimeter mismatch and have to redo either all of the buttons or all of the buttonholes, or move this button stand situation, because of course that will just cost me too much money in terms of therapy. So let's see, there that's going to be, there that is going to be, and those all line up absolutely perfectly. Fabulous. Okay. So I'm going to do this in 2 steps just so we can discuss it. For the first one, I'm just going to stitch straight down the side here. I'll probably come and do maybe a back stitch there, or maybe here. I'll decide as I go. But basically just stitching this portion down. There we have it. Stitch that down. Now, something that you're going to need to do is think about the experience of the wearer and what's going to work for them. So I'm just going to do a few buttons here. And the real challenge with a concealed button stand like this is, how do we secure it in a way that doesn't flap about in the wind? So you can see here, this is going to be totally fine, but then there's nothing to stop this from just exposing all of that. So this is why I have a seam here. Now, of course, as we spoke, this is because of the shape of this gentleman. If you don't want to put a seam there, I would do it if you don't have this kind of shape here. I would just maybe do it in a dart here, or even just maybe a straight line, or just do this whole front piece as a double. You see here, if it's attached there, it's not going to flap open, but this is still not secure enough. It tends to flap open like this. So we do need to secure this button stand to the edge here and there, so that it doesn't end up just flapping open. So each client is going to be a little bit different. You're going to decide for yourself what works. For this client, he prefers every single button to be secured. So how I'm saying is, we need to stitch just on the underside. We need to stitch to the edge here, so that this is not just flapping about, so it's actually secured. And you can do it every 2 buttonholes. That's how I usually do it. But this client likes it every single buttonhole. And I just have a particular way of doing that, which I'm going to now just kind of stitch up. So I want to be a centimeter above the buttonhole, because if I stitch right by the buttonhole, it gets finicky to get your hand in there to actually do the button up. So I leave a centimeter top and bottom of the buttonhole. All right, and then I'm going to stitch here next door. I'm going to curve. No, other way around. Because of course I can't curve here because I need to get under there for the button. So, I make sure I stitch on the outside of this, because, like I say, it needs to be comfortable for you to get to that button. And this portion, the stitch closed, I curve, come around, and I curve like that, and I make like a little pattern like this. But of course, I don't just curve willy-nilly because I'm not an insane person. So I just make sure I mark my curves so that they can be as neat and consistent as possible. I'm just marking a centimeter, top and bottom. This is the kind of thing that you will just never see retail because there's just no chance that someone's going to put all this time in on a retail garment. Okay, and then I need a centimeter that side, centimeter that side, that side, that side. Centimeter, centimeter, centimeter. I have done this all just kind of by eye before, but it just came out so skewed I couldn't even look at it. So I'm just giving myself some guides here. Okay. So stitch along there, at that mark start curving, to that mark start curving like that. And then make that. So that's what's happening. So there I've stitched that all down. I know it's tough to see because it's a navy, but I've just gone around like this. And at the end of the day, all you have to do is make sure your button stand is attached onto the shirt in a way that allows you to still access the buttonhole. And then, like I was saying, on this side, if you don't want to have a seam here, either you have to do the whole front in one section, but I don't actually think that's a great idea, or you have to have some stitch here. Usually I'll do a hand stitch, just a prick stitch along here, because you have to stop this from just flapping out like that. So, like I said, with this client, we've got the seam here, so that's great. So the one other thing I do is here, of course, I need to make sure that these two layers are absolutely identical because I cut them separately and we've now done all of the stitching, so things have moved around. So I'm just going to just trim that down, and then on both sides, the left and the right, I'm actually going to trim this underpiece down ever so slightly. So I'm just going to come back in here, and it's really not much, maybe 1/4 centimeter. I wouldn't even say up to 1/2 centimeter. Really, it's just a little smidge because I don't want to create some random bubble now in my shirt. I still want everything to lie nice and smooth. But what I do want is for this portion to pull back slightly so that this is actually in a way pulled back so there's a little bit of excess here so it doesn't easily just flap up like that. And from there I'll join these side pieces and I'll just join it in a sandwich. You can just join it like that in overlock, but because I have these two edges, I'll sandwich that in, and there will be my front portion and no visible anything here for the button stand. That's how it goes.